measuring performance results. Key accountabilities are broad areas of a job which the employee is responsible for producing results. Results also need to include specific objectives that the employee will achieve as part of each accountability. Objectives are statements of important and measurable outcomes. Discussing results also means discussing performance standards. A performance standard is a yardstick used to evaluate how well employees have achieved each objective. Organizations that implement a management by objectives or MBO philosophy are likely to implement results based performance management systems that include objectives and standards. An emphasis on objectives and standards is likely to allow employees to translate organizational goals into individual goals, which is a key purpose of MBO philosophies. The first step in determining accountabilities is to collect information about the job. The primary source is, of course, the job description that's resulted from the job analysis and a consideration of the unit and organizational level strategic priorities. The job description provides information on the tasks performed. Each included in the job description can be grouped into clusters based on their degree of relatedness. Tasks can be put in clusters, which is a broad area for which the employee is responsible for producing results. After the accountabilities have been identified, we need to determine their relative degree of importance. To understand the issue, we need to answer the following question. What percentage of the employee's time is spent performing each accountability? If the accountability were performed inadequately, would there be a significant impact on the work unit's mission? And is there a significant consequence of error? Although determining accountabilities may seem like a daunting task at first, it's not that difficult. After the accountabilities have been identified, the next step is to determine specific objectives. Objectives are statements of an important and measurable outcome that, when accomplished, will help ensure success for the accountability. The purpose of establishing objectives is to identify a limited number of highly important results that, when achieved, will have dramatic impact on the overall success of the organization. After objectives are set, employees should receive feedback on their progress towards attaining the objective. Also, rewards should be allocated to those employees who have reached their objectives. Objectives are clearly important because they help employees guide their efforts towards a specific target. To ensure a useful function, objectives must have the following characteristics. Objectives must be easy to understand. In addition, they must be verifiable and measurable. Objectives need to be challenging, but not impossible to achieve. They must be a stretch, but employees should feel that the objective is reachable. To be effective, objectives need to result in an agreement between the manager and the employee. Employees need an opportunity to participate in setting objectives. Objectives must be important to the organization. To feel value, employees must believe that if the objective is achieved, that it will have a critical impact on the overall success of the organization. Not all objectives are created equal, therefore, objectives should be prioritized and tackled one by one. Good objectives have deadlines and mileposts. Objectives lacking a time dimension are likely to be neglected. A good objective is doable. That is, employees should have sufficient skills and training to achieve them. In addition to the manager and the employee in question, the other organizational members who may be affected by objectives need to be aware of them. Good objectives are not immutable. They can and likely will change based on changes in the work or business environment. Too many objectives may become impossible to achieve, but too few may not make a significant contribution to the organization. Between 5 and 10 objectives per review period is a manageable number. There are 4 main reasons why goal setting leads to better performance. First, setting a goal establishes a clear priority and clear focus over less important tasks. Second, a specific but difficult goal increases effort over and above an easy, vague, or non existent goal. Third, setting goals improves persistence because it's a clear target in sight. Finally, and perhaps the most critical reason, a specific and difficult goal forces people to create and implement specific strategies, such as how to allocate time and resources to reach the goal. After accountabilities and objectives have been determined, the next step is to define performance standards. These are yardsticks designed to help people understand to what extent the objective has been achieved. The standards provide raters with information about what to look for to determine the level of performance that has been achieved. Standards can refer to various aspects of a specific objective, including quality, quantity, and time. Each of these aspects can be considered a criterion to be used in judging the extent to which an objective has been achieved. How well has the objective been achieved? This can include usefulness, responsiveness, acceptance rate, error rate, and feedback from users or customers. How much has been produced, how many units, how often, and at what cost. For example, commission earnings, dollar volume of sales, and the number of new parents or creative, innovative inventions and projects. What's the timeline? For example, due dates, adherence to schedule, cycle times, and deadlines. Standards must include an action, the desired result, a due date, and some type of quality or quantity measure. Standards usually describe a fully satisfactory performance. As soon as a standard has been created, one can create standards that describe minimum performance and outstanding performance. In writing standards, consider the following characteristics that often determine their usefulness. Good standards are based on the job's key elements and tasks, not on individual traits or person to person comparisons. Good standards are observable and verifiable. They allow us to distinguish between different performance levels. A good standard should be concrete so that there is no dispute over whether or how well it was met. Good standards provide necessary information about performance in the most efficient way possible. Good standards are created by taking into account the cost, accuracy, and availability of the needed data. Good standards are about what's important and relevant to the purpose of the job, to the achievement of the organization's mission and objectives, and the user or recipient of the product or the service. Standards are possible to accomplish, but they require a stretch. Employees should be able to reach the standards within the specified time period. Information should be available on a regular basis to determine whether the employee has reached the standard, and if not, remedial action should be taken. Competencies are measurable clusters of knowledge, skills, and abilities, known as KSAs, that are critical in determining how results will be achieved. We can consider two types of competencies. First, differentiating competencies are those that allow us to distinguish between average and superior performers. Second, threshold competencies are those that everyone needs to display to do a job on a minimally adequate standard. Competencies should be defined in behavioral terms. To understand the extent to which an employee possesses a competency, we measure indicators. Each indicator is an observable behavior that gives us information regarding the competency in question. 5 indicators whose presence would indicate the existence of a consideration competency are the following: supports direct reports projects, asks about the well-being of employees' lives outside of work, encourages direct reports to reach their established goals, gets to know employees personally, and shows respect for employees' work and personal lives. In describing a competency, the following components must be present: a definition, a description of the specific behavioral indicators that can be observed when someone demonstrates a competency effectively, a description of the behaviors that are likely to occur when someone does not demonstrate the competency effectively, and a list of suggestions for developing the competency in question. In contrast to the measurement of results, the measurement of competencies is intrinsically judgmental. In other words, competencies are measured using data provided by individuals who make a judgment regarding the extent to which the competency is present. Two types of systems are used to evaluate competencies: comparative systems and absolute systems. Comparative systems based measurement on comparing employees to one another, whereas absolute systems base the measurement on comparing employees with a prescribed performance standard. Comparative systems of measuring behaviors imply that employees are evaluated relative to one another. If a simple rank order system is used, employees are simply ranked from best performer to worst performer. Alternatively, in an alteration rank order procedure, the result is a list of all employees. Then, raters select the best performer, number 1, and then the worst performer, number n, and the second best, number 2, the second worst, number n minus 1, and so forth, alternating from the top to the bottom of the list until all employees have been ranked. Paired comparisons is another comparative system. In contrast to simple and alteration rank order procedures, explicit comparisons are made between all pairs of employees to be evaluated. Another type of comparison method is the relative percentile method. This type of measurement system asks raters to consider all employees at the same time and to estimate the relative performance of each by using a 100-point scale. In this type of systems, employees are appropriated according to normal distribution, a bell curve with approximately the same number of performers to the right and to the left of the mean score. What are some advantages of using comparative measurement methods? First, these types of measurement procedures are usually easy to explain. Second, decisions resulting from these types of systems are fairly straightforward. It's easy to see which employees were in which distribution. Third, they tend to control several biases and errors made by those rating performance better than do absolute systems. Such errors incurred leniency, like giving high scores to most employees, severity, giving low scores to most employees, and central tendency, not giving any above expectation or below expectation ratings. Fourth, they are particularly beneficial for jobs that are very autonomous, like employees who perform their duties without much independence. A recent study found that individuals high in cognitive abilities are more attracted to organizations that have forced distribution systems. To them, it's a signal that the organization values high achievement and they expect to benefit directly from this type of system. On the other hand, there are also disadvantages associated with the comparative system, which may explain why only about 17% of HR executives report that their organizations use these types of systems. First, employees usually are compared only in terms of a single category, typically overall assessment of performance. As a consequence, the resulting rankings are not sufficiently specific so that employees can receive useful feedback. Second, because the resulting data are based on rankings and not actual scores, there's no information about the relative distance between employees. Many of the criticisms against forced distribution systems and comparative systems in general are similar to those raised against the use of performance ratings. Many organizations that initially abandoned forced distributions and even ratings altogether are using them again with different labels. In absolute systems, raters provide evaluation of an employee's performance without making direct reference to other employees. It's the simplest absolute system, in which a rater writes an essay describing each employee's strengths and weaknesses and makes suggestions for improvement. One advantage of the essay system is that raters have the potential to provide detailed feedback to employees regarding their performance, but essays are almost totally unstructured, and some raters may choose to be more detailed than others. Moreover, some writers may be better at writing essays than others. Given this variability, comparisons across individuals, groups, or units are virtually impossible because essays written by different raters. Finally, essays do not provide any quantitative information, making it difficult to use them in some personnel decisions like the allocations of rewards. A second type of absolute system involves a behavior checklist, which consists of a form listing behavioral statements that are indicators of various components to be measured. The rater's task is to indicate or check statements that describe the employee being rated. When this type of measurement system is in place, raters are not so much evaluators as they are reporters of employee behavior. Because it's likely that all behaviors rated are present to some extent, behavior checklists usually include a description of the behavior, followed by several response categories such as always, very often, fairly often, occasionally, and never. The rater simply checks the response category she feels best describes the employee. Each response category is weighted, for example, from 1 never to 5 always, if the statement describes desirable behavior, such as arriving to work on time. Then, the overall score for each employee is computed by adding the weights of the responses that were checked for each item. How do we select response categories for behavior checklist scales? Often, this decision is fairly arbitrary, and equal interviews between scale points are simply assumed. Behavior checklists are easy to use and understand, but detailed and useful feedback is difficult to extract from the numerical rating provided. Overall, however, the practical advantage of checklists probably account for their current use. Every job includes some critical behaviors that make a critical difference between doing a job effectively and doing it ineffectively. The recorded critical incidents provide a starting point for assessing performance. When critical incidents are collected, this measurement method allows raters to focus on actual job behavior rather than on vaguely defined traits. But collecting critical incidents is very time consuming and can be difficult to summarize. A second variation of the critical incidents technique is the approach adopted in the performance management system implemented by the city of Irving, Texas. First, the city identified core competencies and classified them as core values, skill group competencies, or performance essentials. Then, the team in charge of implementing the system wrote dozens of examples of different levels of performance in each competency, from ineffective to highly effective. In other words, this team was in charge of compiling critical incidents illustrating various performance levels for each competency. Then managers used this list by simply circling the behavior that best described the employees in the work unit. A third variation of the critical incident technique is the use of behaviorally anchored rating scales known as bars, which are described next as one of several types of graphic rating scales. The aim of a graphic rating scale is to ensure that the response categories, ratings of behavior, are clearly defined, that interpretation of the rating by an outside party is clear, and that the rater and employee understand the rating. Several types of methods are available for assessing performance. These methods differ in terms of practicality and usefulness. Practicality and usefulness are key considerations in choosing one type of measurement procedure over another. But there are additional, contextual issues that also determine choices regarding the performance measurement approach. Context plays an important role in determining how performance is measured. This includes the relative emphasis on results and behaviors, the use of comparative or absolute systems, and the many other choices and options in performance management. In some organizations, the culture is highly competitive. In those organizations, it's unlikely that performance management systems will include measures of contextual performance such as competencies regarding cooperation and working with others. Another contextual factor that affects choices in terms of performance management is the issue of industry trends. Leadership also plays an important role in how performance is measured. There are also contextual factors that play an important role in how performance is measured. These factors are related to the culture of the organization, characteristics of the industry, and the strategic direction chosen by the organization's leadership.